Tomorrow night, I really would like for all the church to be here. Because tomorrow night I'm going to challenge you to be everything that God wants you to be and you can be. We're going to set the standards high, set the sights high, and go get them tomorrow night. So don't miss. And Wednesday night, I'm going to talk about the Lord's return to this earth. And if you have someone unsaved, Wednesday night would be a great night to get them to come. So I hope you will. I preach this message on the family tonight because I do a lot of marriage seminars, and I always say at the marriage seminar this: when your marriage is right, almost everything in your world will be in order. And when your marriage is wrong, man, it's hard to get anything right. And I think the same thing about your church. When your marriage and families in the church are right, your church will be right. And it's really hard to get it right if that's not true. And let me just broaden that another step. If the marriages in America were right, our nation would be right. The greatest problem in America today is the breakdown of the family. Let's read the 127th Psalm. It's a great psalm about the home. It starts off with a wonderful verse. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. It is vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for so he giveth his beloved sleep. Lo, children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. As arrows are in the hands of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate. Now, may I tell you tonight that I am not an authority on marriage and raising children. Before I got married, I was. Before I got married, I could have written a book, 3 steps to raise perfect kids who will never fail or let you down. Then I got married and had kids. And now my sermon would be, here's a couple things you could try that could but probably will not work. You see, after I got married, all the beautiful theories I had about marriage were murdered by a gang of ugly facts. When Freddie and I married, we didn't know anything. We didn't even suspect anything when we got married. She graduated, I hate to admit this, it's ruined a lot of good preaching about waiting, being careful. But she graduated from high school on Friday night. We married the next Monday night. We didn't know anything. We didn't suspect anything. We knew we loved each other. Here came the kids. 10 months after we were married, Cheryl was born. 2.5 years later, Alan was born. And then 9 years later came Kyle David. We should have named him Encore. He was not on the program. He just showed up one day. Freddie and I had no child raising manuals. Dr. Spock's book on raising kids was about all written at that time, and I'm quite sure we didn't read that. When Cheryl was born, we were so paranoid that nothing touched her mouth that had not been pasteurized, sanitized, sterilized, homogenized, and we wore gloves. By the time we got to Kyle David, he shared his bottle with the dog. We had figured that out time we got to Kyle David. When Cheryl was born, we broiled the pacifier. Time we got to Kyle David, we just blew on it, stuck it in his mouth, shook it, stuck it in his mouth, held it under the faucet, stuck it in his mouth, put it in our own mouth and stuck it in his mouth. All of you been there? But I have studied the Bible a lot. I have raised 3. And I have listened as a pastor of a great church for many years and watched so many wonderful parents and grandparents. Maybe I know a little more. Now, grandchildren are wonderful. I think that grandchildren are God's reward for not killing your own kids. James Dobson was right, I think, when he said parenting is not for cowards. You know something? Having a child is like taking a piece of your heart and letting it walk around outside of your body. May I give you 4 good common sense statements from God's Word that I think parents need to know about raising children. And this is not just a parenting. I'm going to talk a lot about marriage tonight, but primarily about parenting. And honest parents in this building tonight would honestly say, I need help, because we live in a strange and troubling world about children. Every frustrated child in America knows that. Most parents know that. All school teachers know that. All police officers know that. There are 3 reasons why. Number 1 is the dysfunctional family, just the breakup of the family. Wouldn't it be great if every child in America had a Christian father in a Christian home? Wouldn't it be great in America if every child in America had a mom and dad he knew loved each other? The Assembly of God evangelist David Wilkerson said a beautiful statement one time. He said, when I was growing up, the greatest security I had was that I knew my mom and dad loved each other. Somebody that looks back now to a parent that I had who were married for 64 years. I appreciate the truth of what David Wilkerson said. I was in a preacher's home. We never had a lot of money. We never had a lot of things. But I knew every day of my life my mom and dad loved each other. There was never a moment in my life that I ever doubted when I got home they'd both be there. I never was kept awake at night because mom and dad were fighting. I never heard my dad say a curse word. Never saw my dad take a drink of alcohol. Never heard my daddy ever say a bad thing to my mother. I knew my mom and dad loved each other. Second problem in the American home, and I can get killed for saying this, but just let me, fools rush in, you know, where angels fear to tread. But one of the problems we've got is the working mother. Even the media is tackling this. This is not from a preacher. This is a cover story in Time magazine. I'm going to quote it. Listen. Last week's survey, funded by the National Institute of Health and the largest ever on the subject, had something awful for just about everyone. Now please listen. The more hours children spend away from their mothers, researchers concluded, the more likely they are to be defiant, aggressive, and disobedient by the time they get to kindergarten. Kids who are in child care more than 30 hours a week scored higher on items like gets in lots of fights, cruelty, explosive behavior, as well as talking too much, argues a lot, and demands a lot of attention. It didn't matter if the children were black or white, rich or poor, male or female, and most confounding, whether the care was provided by a traditional child care center, a nanny, a grandmother, even dad. Only mom will do. That's a secular statement. Now, if you moms could just stay home until they went to school, it would make all the difference in the world. Now, God bless you single moms. You're heroes to me. You have no choice in the matter. But the working mothers split apart the family, where both mom and dad come home tired, frustrated, lots of stress. And instead of a mom that's been home and a dad comes home to an oasis, sometimes they both come home where the oasis has to be made after they get there. And I'm not just really fussing at you. I'm just saying one of the great things you could do for your children. If you possibly can, if you can cut some corners, if you can do without a few things, keep mom at home. And the third thing that's hurting our children is the steady erosion of God and a standard of right and wrong in our culture. You see, we've made everything neutral, and anything goes in our culture, and we've had an incredible drop in American morals. I announced my topic tonight, how to raise G-rated kids in an X-rated world. And we live in an X-rated society. Now, I think we know the problems. I'll not dwell on those. Let's talk about answers. 4 statements from the Word of God. First of all, if you want to do a great job raising kids, start here. Realize your children are a gift of God. The Bible said in verse 3, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward from God. I heard a man say once that little babies are a statement from God that he has not given up on the world. One poem about little babies ended, and how did you come to us, my dear? God thought of you, and so I am here. Folks, listen to me. That child is a touch of God in your life. Your baby is God's gift manifested through the bodies of the parents. That baby is so sacred, it is impossible to define. Where mortal love, the love of a man and a woman for each other, produce another life, having an immortal soul. And I believe that happens in the womb, which is the reason I am against abortion. The discerning parent goes from awe to wonder to praise. That child is not just a piece of tissue that's fought its way out of the womb to you. That child is a gift of God to you. It came so clear to me when Cheryl was born. Freddie and I were just kids. She was just, as I said, out of high school, not a year out of hardly high school when Cheryl was born. And we had a delightful time during her pregnancy. Everything was new. Everything was exciting. Every time she grabbed my hand and said, feel here. You ever gone through that? Oh, he's kicking, feel here. Or it really was he's moving, but he turned out to be a she. And the last few days, the last week before Cheryl was born, Freddie had a very severe case of toxemia. And Dr. Finch put her in the hospital. And he couldn't clear it up. And then he tried to get the baby here, and he started giving her pit, and it wasn't working. One long day, and then another long day, and it wasn't happening. And I said, honey, I'm going to go get a haircut, and I'll be right back. And I was sitting in the barber chair when the phone rang, and the barber handed it to me, and my daddy said, son, you better get back up here. And I'm telling you, I really lit a shuck. You understand that? I lit a shuck. And I got to the hospital, and I went in. This is the days before you went into the delivery room, and I'm in the labor room, and they'd kind of knocked Freddie out. And I'm sitting there beside the bed, and every time she hit a pain, the contractions, she would rise in the bed and turn over in the bed. And she was out, but I could tell what it was doing to her. And I sat there beside her bed, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried. I was so scared. And when they took her back, I went out, and her mom and dad were crying, and my mom and dad were crying, and I was crying. And Dr. Finch said, you guys need to pray. It's a pretty tough situation. And he went back, and he was gone a long time. We didn't know anything. And he walked out and said, it's still not here. Give us 30 more minutes or so, and he went back. And, you know, you can really pray, can't you? And then he came out and said, the baby's here. It's a little girl. Freddie is fine. And folks, they cleaned that little girl up, and they put her in a little bassinet, and the nurse came out and said, you can see your daughter. There's my dad, Mom. I'm sorry, that's just an emotional time for me. And there was her mom and dad, and they opened the curtain, and there was that girl. And I looked at her, and you know something? I was just totally overwhelmed. I looked at that little girl. It was a part of me. It was a part of Freddie. It was a part of God. Mortal love produced an immortal soul. That's Freddie, that's God. And I stood there, I was overwhelmed at that little girl. I wondered about Abraham and Sarah. He was 100, she was 90, and they had a baby. Now I want to ask you, how much do you think they treasured that baby? That's the way you ought to treasure your baby. When Mary had a baby, how much do you think she treasured that baby? She knew via an angel that baby is a gift of God. How much did she treasure that baby? That's the way you ought to treasure your baby. You see, none of us can do much of a job raising our children without realizing that child is God's gift to you and treat them as such. I'm a big sports fan. Any of you remember Harmon Killebrew, Minnesota Twins? He's in the Hall of Fame. When Harmon Killebrew was introduced to the Hall of Fame and he made his introduction speech, he began to cry, and he talked about his daddy and mama, and he talked primarily about his daddy. And he said, when I was a little boy, he said, my daddy had my brother and I, and we were out in the front yard, and we were playing ball, and we were rolling around, and my mama would come out and say, you guys are tearing up the grass. And said, my daddy said to my mama, honey, we're not raising grass. We're raising boys. You know what? That's a daddy that has a good grasp on the importance of life. That child is a gift of God. Second, children need an example. Children need an example. Now, as I heard a preacher say one time, the cheese gets a little more binding on this point, if you know what I mean. Maybe the only child-raising scripture many of us know is Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Now, hang on, and may I tell you that I think we make some mistakes with that verse. Sometimes we take that verse and use it as an excuse to put the responsibility upon God, the responsibility upon the church, the responsibility upon the Sunday school, the responsibility upon the pastor for our child's behavior. Sometimes we interpret the verse this way. Be sure your child is in Sunday school and church. Teach them some scriptures from the Bible, plus some hymns and prayers, and send them to summer camp. And when they grow up, they will always turn out right. That's not what that verse says. We quote that verse like it's a magical formula. But is it true? Let me ask you a question. Do all kids who go to Sunday school turn out right? Do all kids who go to youth camp turn out right? Do all kids who've got a Sunday school pin that drag the floor turn out right? Listen to me. Who has any guarantee that a free moral agent will always choose to do the right thing? And your children are free moral agents, and if you've got more than one, you realize every one of those kids are as different as they can be. They respond to you different. They respond to life different. They respond to discipline different. Kids are different. We're all free moral agents. So, what is God saying? Well, the word train up in this verse is the picture of a mother cow licking milk on the lips of a newborn calf to create thirst for milk. It's a midwife dipping the juice of crushed dates and placing them in the mouth of the newborn to create a sucking sensation and then transfer that baby to the mother's breast. The meaning, I think, is clear. If you want your child to have a thirst for the right things when they get older, you must create a taste for the right things when they are younger. Create a thirst in the lives of your children for the things you want them to thirst for, and when they get old, they will not depart from the thirst that you have put in their mouth as they were growing up. Children need an example. You see, that little mind is a computer. When it's born, it's basically empty with a bent toward evil. Did you notice anywhere along the way you didn't have to teach your children to do wrong? They're born understanding that. But from birth on, they get programmed by their parents, especially those first few critical years. Parents are to train for a purpose. Charles Swindoll said, parents' fingerprints are smeared all over the lives of their children. The first training for civility, yes ma'am, no ma'am, opening the door for a lady, respecting women, respecting authority. The first training for civility is in the home. Children learn how they are expected to behave by observing their parents' behavior. Character is caught in the home by a dad who has character, by a mom who has character. Self-control is taught in the home. Morals are taught in the home. Respect is taught in the home. Honesty is taught in the home. Can't have children to grow up to be honest if you're not honest. Children are not growing up to respect the policeman if you don't respect the policeman. Children won't grow up to respect the president if you don't respect the office of the president. Children will not grow up to respect the pastor unless you respect the pastor. I told our church, you can go home from church and barbecue Jerry Thorpe, slice me up, and feed me for Sunday lunch. You can take me apart and spit me out in front of your children. But if you do that, the day will come when they're 16 or 17 and you desperately want them to listen to the man of God who pastors that church, and they won't listen or pay me respect because their mom and dad have never respected me. You see, respect is taught in the home. Love is taught in the home. It is so important for our children to feel love in the home. Children need to be held. They need to be kissed. They need to be touched tenderly. You need to make eye contact with your children with love in your eye. Don't always be glaring at your kid. Don't always be mad. Be fun to live with. A guy asked me one time in a sermon, he was preaching to everybody, but he was really preaching to me. He asked a question. I want to ask you a question. As a husband, are you fun to live with? Don't you hate it when somebody says that and your wife's with you? And she's got a sharp elbow, well, you know. He said, I want to ask you a question about your children. Are you fun to live with? Wouldn't it be nice if the children didn't have to go outside the home to have fun? Wouldn't it be nice to have a home where they wanted to bring their other kids into the home because mom and dad were so much fun to live with? Love is taught in the home. Prayers are caught in the home. I'm a little guy. Something happened I've never forgotten. Running down the hall of our house. I'm a little guy. Running down the hall of our house, I burst unthinkingly into our parents' bedroom. That's a terrible, I wasn't thinking. I burst into our parents' bedroom, and my dad was on his knees beside his bed. He had his glasses off, lying on the bed. His eyes were red with tears, which ran down his cheeks. And he was there with an open Bible, and my daddy was praying. My daddy was praying. And I ran into that home and caught my daddy on his knees before God. And you know something? I'm 67 years old. That's in my mind like it happened this morning. Prayers are caught. You know what the kids miss? You know what the grandkids miss since Dad's died? They miss him praying at our Thanksgiving meal. They miss him praying at Christmas. Because my dad could pray. And he just reached up and got a hold of God and all our family and knit us together. Prayers are caught. Reading the Bible is caught. Now let me use another example. My mom now is 86, and she was at our house, not where we live now, but the house before, and I missed her. So I said, well, where's Mom? And I went up the stairs to the little room where she is, and I came in, and she was lying in the bed, and she had pillows behind her, and the open window, she had her glasses on, and she was lying in bed with the Bible open. And she was reading the Word of God. It's something I'd seen her do all her life. When I preached to you the other morning that I made a goal in my life to read the Bible through, I caught that from my mom and dad. Dads, if your kids have never seen you with an open Bible, if they don't hear you pray, if they don't hear Mama pray, how can they catch something that's not a part of their life? Children need an example. Too many times we try to browbeat our way in. I'm not talking to you about browbeating. I'm talking to you about training by life, by words, by action. This is an old saying, but let me say it. If a child lives with criticism, he learns to condemn. If a child lives with hostility, he learns to fight. If a child lives with ridicule, he learns to be shy. If a child lives with shame, he learns to feel guilty. But if a child lives with tolerance, he learns to be patient. If a child lives with encouragement, he learns confidence. If a child lives with praise, he learns to appreciate. If a child lives with fairness, he learns justice. If a child lives with security, he learns to have faith. If a child lives with approval, he learns to like himself. If a child lives with acceptance and friendship, he learns to find love in the world. Parents, listen to me. All that is bad and X-rated in America is knocking on the front door of your home, asking you, are the children here? Everything that's bad and X-rated is knocking on the door. Our society has messages of rebellion, drinking, open marriage, sexual liberation, anger, and doubt about God. It comes through movies. It comes through television. It comes through music. It comes through magazines. Sometimes it comes through the classroom. You cannot build walls high enough to keep it out. We would like to. We would like to build walls and keep the world from touching our children. That cannot be done. But what you can do is build something into your marriage and in your home that this world cannot batter down. You can teach your children something about love in the way you and your wife love each other and express that love and show that love. And you can build something into your kids by your character and your morality and your honesty and your decency and the way you treat each other and the way you treat God and the way you treat pastor and the way you work hard and how you handle your money and what you will or will not watch on that television. And what you will or will not say with your mouth. You are building things into your children that this world can never batter down. When I went to college, they attacked my faith. But one reason they didn't win is because I knew my daddy had a faith in God they couldn't break down. I knew my mama had a faith in God that was not something of this world, but it was something only God could give them. Folks, listen to me. You need a great marriage. You need a great, loving, exciting, hot, marriage. I know this is not a marriage seminar. You ought to hear me at my marriage seminar. I think this is wild. You need a great marriage. You need a romantic marriage. You need a kissy-poo marriage. You need a marriage where you've never got over the honeymoon. First time I kissed Freddie Mae Langston, fire shot out my ears. My hair stood on end. My socks rolled up and down. We celebrated our 45th anniversary. I was preaching in Cape Cod, so we're out on Martha's Vineyard, us and Bill and Hillary. We're out on Martha's Vineyard, 45th anniversary, and I love her. I kissed her. 45 years we've been together. We're not the same as we used to be, but when I kissed her, my hair stood up. Fire shot out my ears. My socks rolled up and down. She thinks I'm messing with her, but I'm telling her, honey, you're as exciting to me right now as you were the first night we spent of our marriage together. And I mean that with all my heart and soul. You know something? I want my kids to learn one thing and know one thing. I don't care where they go, what they do wrong, what they get into. I want them to know at home they got a mom and daddy who love each other. World can't batter that down. World can't take that away. Build a great marriage and a great home, and that home needs the support of a great church. Every Christian couple needs a great church. This church is not... when I was pastoring, I'd go in there and say, well, now, what do you have to entertain the kids? Well, now, what kind of a question is that? The church is not a place to entertain your kids. The church is a place that helps you put God and moral fiber in your kids. That's the first question you ought to ask. Is the Bible taught in the Sunday school by teachers who love God? And you know something, folks? That takes time. And don't you have the audacity to say, well, I don't give my marriage much time, but it's quantity. Don't say that. And don't say, I don't give my kids much time, but it's quality. Don't say that. Your kids need quality of time, but they need a quantity of time. Your wife needs quality of time, but she needs a quantity of time. Do you know how your little children spell love? They spell it T-I-M-E. When a daddy spends time with these kids, they know he loves them. And there are a lot of problems because we don't have time. We're not listening. We're not listening because of our own interest and pressures. That is a very good reason why if a mama can be at home, she's got time to listen, time to sit down, time to read, time to put your values, your character, your morals in your kids. Maybe you've heard this story, but there was a terrible storm and the little boy was crying in his room. And the daddy came into the room and he comforted him and he petted him and then he put him back down and he said, now son, don't be afraid. I know there's a terrible storm, but don't be afraid, son. God is in this room with you. And he started to leave, and he turned out the light, and the little boy cried. He said, but Daddy, I need someone with skin on. And that's what your kids need, someone with skin on. Now, I put this third point in because the kids want me to. Children need discipline. Aren't you kids excited that that's in there? The last verse says, they shall not be ashamed when they speak with their enemies. In other words, I'm not ashamed about how my kids have turned out. Now, I don't want to labor on this because I'm telling you, I got 3, and if I'd have just had one, my middle son, Alan, I would have written books how to raise great kids because he is a great kid. But now them other 2 tested every fiber of my being. Now, discipline's not easy. I read of a daddy who was a good daddy, and he just got exasperated, and he picked his son up, and he was shaking him, and he said, son, I don't know what's wrong with you. I think the devil has a hold of you. And he said, I think so too, Daddy. Now, may I, listen to me, parents. Too much of so-called discipline is just stressed out parenting. We're mad at the boss, and we come home and take it out on the kids. We're mad at traffic, and we come home and take it out on the kids. We don't feel good, so we take it out on the kids, who are just being kids, who are just being little boys and little girls. They're not doing anything wrong. A mother asked her son to take the trash out, and he didn't. And boy, she got mad. I can't believe how you could be such a sorry son and yuckity, and you didn't take the trash out. Well, he said, Mom, look at it this way. The next time you're at church and you're in a little group, and one of the women says, I want you to pray for my son. He's on drugs. His home is broken up. We think he's going to the jail. You could say, that's nothing. My son won't take the trash out. I just love that little story. And sometimes we just pound on the kids because they're kids. And we take out because we're mad at the boss on the kids, or mad at life on the kids. Or we're frustrated with ourselves, and we come home and take it out on our wife or our kids. And you know, when you get like that, you can say the dumbest thing. You parents ever listen to yourself? Shut up and eat your dinner. Well, you can't do both of those things at the same time, you know. I'm going to kill you, and then you're going to bed. No. You want a spanking? Oh, what's the answer to that question? Oh, yeah, I'd love a spanking. Could you get a bird with a nail in it? Yeah, really pour it on me, you know. Let's talk about discipline. The Bible and Christians really get a bad press on this issue. Spare the rod and spoil the child has been taken out of context, put on television by every media type who can find some loony Christian who are beating the devil out of their kids in the name of God. And they say, see, that's what God says. No, that's not what God says. But sometimes we shy away. Maybe the Christians and the Bible are wrong. Don't discipline too firmly. But any rational parent knows discipline is necessary, or we're going to raise barbarians. The Bible says if we do not discipline, we do not love our children. And America, unfortunately, is not disciplining very well in this modern, well-read, no guidelines society. Listen to this. Junior bit the meter man. Junior kicked the cook. Junior is antisocial now, according to the book. Junior smashed the clock and lamp. Junior hacked the tree. Destructive trends are treated in chapters 2 and 3. Junior threw his milk at Mom. Junior screamed for hours. Notes on self-assertiveness are found in chapter 4. Junior got in Grandpa's room and tore up his fishing line. That's to gain attention. See page 89. Grandpa grabbed the belt and yanked Junior across his knee. Grandpa hadn't read a book since 1943. Proverbs 3 says, let me just paraphrase, don't despise the chastening of the Lord. Don't detest his correction. For whom the Lord loves, he chastens. He disciplines. Just as a father, a son in whom he delights. You let your kids throw screaming fits, tear up the room, doesn't work around the house, what you're really saying is, I don't really care how you turn out. But when you love your children, you will discipline them. Proverbs 13, if you refuse to discipline your son, it proves you don't love him. Because if you love him, you'll be prompt to discipline him. The Bible meaning of discipline is training. The discipline to behave. I will not let you act that way. The discipline to have character. The discipline to work. Some of you teenage girls are here. I'm not sure you're listening, but you're here. I know you got more important things to discuss. But you know what I told our church? I told the teenagers of our church, before you marry a girl, She invites you over to her house for dinner. You go, and you eat, and you might observe the house because the one that taught her how to be a wife is her mother. But sometime during that evening you say, let's say her name's Brenda. Is there any Brendas here? Let's say her name is Gertrude. I would like to look at Gertrude's room. When you say that, Gertrude will look like she just saw a ghost. And she will say, no, Mama, no, he cannot see my room. Mama, no, he cannot see my room. But Mama will say, yeah, you can come here. I want it. No, Mama, don't do it. Come in. Look at her room. I've seen teenage girls' rooms that were so dirty the flies were trying to get out of it, you know. Cockroaches hung themselves in that room. And I told them boys, keep in mind, the way she keeps that room is the way she's going to keep your house. Girls always love that. The discipline to behave, to have character, to work, to honor their parents, to honor authority. I grew up in a generation, if you got spanked in school, you better pray to Almighty God your parents didn't find out you got spanked at school. They didn't come marching down there threatening to sue, beat up the principals, stuff. No, sir. If I got one at school, I got a worse one at home. You remember that? You know why? They were teaching me to honor authority. And God is right. If we spare discipline, we raise a spoiled child. Train up a child in the way he should go. That doesn't mean put him into prison. You let them grow the way you prune a tree. You pull it back. You stake it up. You cut off the dead. You guide a limb as it grows. We shape them into godliness. That's what discipline is. I want to make one last statement on discipline. I think successful discipline is not the pain. It's the relationship. It's the relationship. Think that over, because that's a good statement. It's not the pain, it's the relationship. Now let me get to my last point, which is children need a touch of God. Children are a gift from God. They need an example. They need discipline. They need a touch of God, unless the Lord builds the house. I've heard preachers get up and say, I did this right, and this right, and this right, and this right, and my kids have turned out right. And I kind of cringe, because I say things like, I did my best, but I messed up, but God helped me. God helped me. You better hope God gets involved with your kids. You better hope God gets involved. You need to do your best to give your children a touch of God, because unless the Lord builds the house, we'll labor in vain. You ever thought about some of our Bible heroes became heroes when they were teenage years? They weren't old enough to develop all this faith. Somewhere their parents had passed along their faith. When David walked down the hill and gave the giant Goliath Excedrin headache number 1, he didn't learn to walk with God on the way down that hill. His daddy Jesse had put something in him at home. Put something in him at home. And when Joseph was sold by his brothers as a 17-year-old boy, for all the faults his daddy had, he put a love and respect for God in that boy. And when Daniel was taken as a refugee, one of the most incredible stories in the Bible, and set in one of the greatest societies the world has ever known, Babylon, and had the opportunity of a lifetime. If you ever studied that through, at the king's table, in the king's court, Nebuchadnezzar, the brilliant young king and military leader of Babylon, and these guys could be officials in his court. He taught them the very best of Babylon. One little catch, there was the king's meat and the king's wine. These boys had been raised under good King Josiah. The prophet was Jeremiah. We don't even know their parents' name. But their parents had instilled their faith that Daniel and the 3 Hebrew boys said, we will not eat the king's meat nor drink the king's wine. They drew a line in the Babylonian sand because they had a mom and daddy that taught them something about a touch of God. And one of the greatest stories, girls, in the Bible is Queen Esther. We don't even know. Perhaps she was an orphan girl raised by Uncle Mordecai, but in a strange contest became queen of one of the great world empires that set through the wickedness of Haman, who hated the Jews. An edict was passed to destroy the Jewish people. And Mordecai came to Esther, this beautiful young lady who was queen, and said, you must go before the king and plead for the life of our people. And she said, I haven't been called, and if I walk in there without being called, I can be killed. And Mordecai said, maybe God brought you to the kingdom for a time like this. She said, you pray for 3 days. You and the people pray and fast for 3 days, and I'll go before the king, and if I die, I die. I'm going to tell you something about that girl. Uncle Mordecai had put a touch of God in her life. And when the God of this universe looked over all the young ladies in the world to pick the mother of his son, have you ever followed that through in your mind? What kind of characteristics Mary must have had for the God of this universe to say, I want you to be the mother of my son? I don't even know her parents' name. But they'd put something in that girl that when God wanted a mother, he found her in Mary. And that's what I'm trying to tell you. That somewhere along the line, we've got to teach our kids to stand alone for God. You've got to pass on your faith. You've got to pass on something you have. You can't pass on something you don't have. You can't skip it and Grant Adams put it in your kids. It's got to come from mom and dad. You've got to pass along your faith. Now, let me just wind it up. Would you hang with me a few more minutes? Most of us know what we need to do. We need to express our love to our family. We get so busy. In my marriage seminar in the morning session, my first 3 sessions, we don't have time. I'm too pooped to pop and stuff like that are the titles of my first 3 deals. And it's all about taking time to let the romance and the love you had when you started still be a part of your life. We get so busy with work, we don't have time to talk, to dream, to court, to look each other in the eye and say, I love you. How long has it been since you looked your little kids in the eye and said, I love you. I'm glad you're my son. I'm glad you're my daughter. I'm glad you're in my home. Sometimes we don't express our love like we ought to. Sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, we don't appreciate all the things they've done for us. I tell teenagers, when you open that dresser drawer and there are all those shorts and things and they smell good and they're clean, did you ever wonder how they got there? When you come in and sit down at a table and it's just gorgeous and all the food's there, did you ever think about who spent several hours cooking that? And when you go in and say, Dad, can I have the car? And you take the keys and run out of the door, do you ever think who worked hard day after day after day to buy that car? When he comes home from work at night and he's tired, are you just asking him for stuff? Or do you ever stop and think what a wonderful father you have and how hard he works? Do you ever live in your house and think about what a wonderful mother you have and how hard she works? And how long has it been since you said to your mother, Mama, I love you. And you do 1,000 things for me I don't think about, but I want you to know that I love you and I appreciate what you've done for me. How long has it been since you've said to your wife, I guess as you get older, maybe you appreciate, but I get to looking at Freddie and all she is and all she has been for all of these years, and I think of how she's loved me and all the times I haven't been lovely and all the times I've been stressed and smart-mouthed and stupid, and she still loved me and just was patient. And all the time she looks good, and all the mornings I've looked over and there she lays, and she's so beautiful, and she loves me. And she's loved our kids, and still loves our kids, and loves our grandkids, and the house is immaculate. It's always immaculate. Freddie can say to any friend we got, I need to go clean the house, and every one of them will say, why? And you know, I've tried more and more and more. Now this is stupid, but I'm going through the Neiman Marcus of Granbury, where I live, Walmart. And I'm walking along this 2.5-mile long candy deal. And I happen to see Reese's little cups. And I'm thinking, Freddie Mae loves those. So big spender I am. I got a big sack of those, and I walked around to the card deal, and I got a card to my wife, and I wrote on that card everything I loved about her. from the house to the kids, that she loves my parents and treats them like hers, to the way she treats her parents, to the way she treats our family. I just wrote everything about I could think loving everywhere and took it home and just laid it down and went about my business. And she came in from where she was and she read it. And man, I really did good. And I didn't spend a lot of money and stuff. I just let her know I really love you. How long has it been? You know what? When you got married because of the way you treated each other. You fell in love because of the way you treated each other. You fell in love thinking all the rest of your life was going to be that way. What happened? I tell you what happens. We quit doing the things we did when we fell in love. So I want to ask you to do it again. And do it now because you don't have much time. You ever seen Fiddler on the Roof in any capacity? Did you ever watch the guy in Fiddler on the Roof, the man? And he begins to sing, listen to this. Where is the little girl I carried? Where is the little boy at play? I don't remember growing older. When did they? Let me tell you something about life. You know how long it seems since Freddie and I got married? Since I walked in the side door of the church with funeral music playing, and I stood right there, that's a joke, right there, and she came walking down the center aisle on the arm of her father, smiling at me like a sheep-killing dog. I'm coming to get you, boy. You know how long it's been since we got married? About that long. Seems like it happened like the day before yesterday. But it's 45 years ago. You know how long it seems I stand in that hospital crying, looking through the window at Cheryl? About that long. Cheryl's in her 40s. You know how long it seems since Alan and I ran down that hall and played and wrestled and rolled on the floor? You know how long it's been? About that long. You know how long it's been? I know you got these little old kids and they can occupy all your time and you never have a few moments, and sometimes you think, well, they're never going to grow up. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Quickly. You know how long it's been since I left the church? Freddie and I hadn't, been married probably in our 3rd year. And let you know how stupid I was driving a Nash Rambler. And we're on our way home after the evening service. Here I am, here's Freddie, and Cheryl Lynn, a beautiful little blonde-haired girl standing between us. That's before seat restraints. If we'd have had a wreck, we'd all three gone through the window the way God intended. One happy family right through the front window. And I figured I could get by with saying that in Wyoming. We're riding along after church, and Cheryl is just a little blonde-haired girl, year and a half or so, standing there, not talking very well, and she's leaning down, looking, and she's saying, "Moo, moo." I said, "Moo? Moo?" I thought cows were flying. I couldn't figure what in the world. And her mother said, "She's looking at the moon." "Oh, yeah, moon." You know how long that's been? About that long. About that long. If you're going to love them, you better love them now. If you're going to give them your life, you better give it to them now. If you're going to put your arms around your wife and say, "Honey, hand everything to me," you better do it now. Better do it now. It was his 50th birthday, and it was a bad day. 50th birthday, wasn't happy about it. And he got up that morning, and on his 50th birthday, everything was going wrong. He didn't really feel that good. His wife burnt the toast, and the eggs were wrong, and he was 50. He went out and got in his car and started toward work, and the air conditioner was broken. It was the hottest day of the year, and he was 50. Traffic was terrible. Finally got to work, went up. Secretary wasn't there. Boss was griping, and he was 50. A long 8 hours. Came back down, got in the car without an air conditioner, hottest day of the year, driving home, and he's 50. And he gets home, and he pulls up in his driveway, slams on his brakes, crams his car in park, gets out because there in the driveway was Rick's bicycle. Rick is his 10-year-old son. bicycle, cursing under his breath. He said, how many times have I told Rick, don't leave your bicycle in the driveway? And he picked up the bicycle of his son and threw it off the driveway and crammed his car into the garage and stomped into the house and went into the living room and turned the air conditioner up on high and kicked off his shoes and got the paper and got the sports page and got in the recliner and leaned back and the air conditioner blowing on him, reading the sports. And for the first time on his 50th birthday, something was going right. When all of a sudden, a little old stick of dynamite rolled in around that corner named Rick. And he came flying around the corner and landed right in the middle of his daddy's paper. And two little arms went around his daddy's neck. And a little boy began to kiss his daddy all over the face. But he was hot and he was tired and he was 50. So he took those two little arms and pulled him back and he said, what are you doing, Rick? And his little boy, with a smile that would ripen bananas, said, 50 kisses, Daddy. 50 kisses for 50 years. But he was hot, and he was tired. So he put his boy over the side of the chair and said, well, why don't we take care of that later? That's a terrible thing to do to your boy. And this little boy ran outside and picked up the bicycle that his dad had thrown cursing off of the driveway and picked it up and got on it, and he began to cry. And he started driving down the driveway out toward the street. And because he was crying, he drove right out into the street and never saw the car that hit him and killed him. And the last words he ever heard was his daddy saying, let's take care of that later. Well, I come to the close of the service tonight, and I'd like to challenge you to take care of something now. And that's your family. And I tell you what I want you to do, and I'm going to tell you with you looking at me. In a few moments, we're going to bow our heads, and maybe I can just have somebody play. We're going to stand. And you know what I'd like for you to do? I'd like for you husbands to take your sweetheart by the hand, and I'd like for you to get somewhere in this room, here at the front, down the center aisle, or there, or somewhere. And I want your kids to come and join your parents. And if you got room to get on your knees, get on your knees. And I want you to talk to each other. I want you to tell each other how much you love each other, how much you thank God that you've got each other. And I want you to tell your little kids how much you love them. I want you to hug them. And then I want you to pray together and thank God. And the preacher's got a lot of his family here tonight. Won't that be a blessing? He's got his kids here tonight. One of the sweetest services. I preached this message when my son Alan and his wife and his two daughters. My kids are all over the world. I don't hardly get to... And, Alan came down now just bawling. He's a coach, just squalling. And I got to tell him how much I loved him and my daughter-in-law and those two precious, perfect grandchildren, how much I loved him. It's a special night. That's what I want you to do. Now, if your family's not here, then pray for them. And I'm going to keep the service until you get through praying with each other. And I want you to do one other thing to kind of close the service. So let's stand together. Father, may we love our families more than anything. Now, with heads bowed, would you just come and kneel together as families, and you kids come and join your parents wherever they are. Come together as a family. We're not going to need any music, Brother Barry. We're just going to let you pray with her. And you just get with your family. Wherever your family is, come and join them.